This is Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Let's talk some wrestling, shall we? Chris Graham here on Street Knowledge, and you know, there's a lot going on in the wrestling business. Later in the show, we'll talk about the Walk Up to No Mercy, WWE's next pay-per-view, the Raw branded pay-per-view. I guess we still we'll talk about that. We'll talk about some Ronda Rousey news. First, let's start with, well, and we don't know what to call this either, TNA Wrestling, Impact Wrestling, GFW, Global Force Wrestling, whatever the case may be. There's news that's yet again not good regarding that company. Sports Illustrated reporting this week that GFW and Anthem, its current owner, Anthem looking to sell GFW, essentially, or sell what it owns, which it owns Impact Wrestling. It owns the TNA brand name, which for some convoluted reason it threw away as it aligned forces with Jeff Jarrett, the founder of TNA Wrestling, who then, after he left a couple years ago, founded Global Force Wrestling, which never really took off on its own, to say the least. Then he, folded it back within as best he could with the TNA that he had birthed back in the early 2000s. And they've been marketing themselves with their weekly Impact TV show on Pop TV, the former TV Guide channel, the last few months. Well, now the word is that Jarrett is out officially temporarily, but you have to wonder how temporary it can be in his role as Chief Creative Officer at GFW, and now the word is that Anthem is looking to sell. Effectively, maybe not as much looking to sell as just get out of the wrestling business, finding out that the business, according to the Sports Illustrated article, hemorrhages money. And that's not hard to figure. GFW, TNA, Impact has had trouble keeping a TV contract the last few years. Consistently, they fell from Spike TV to, what was the one in the middle there? There was a company that I didn't even know I had the channel. Now they're on Pop TV. There was a regular flow of money back when they were on Spike TV, which is one of those basic cable things, which is good because basic cable means, you don't have to buy one of those upper tier packages for people to be able to access your channel. And that's great because that means that effectively anybody who's got cable, almost anybody who's got satellite gets your channel in the basic package. Well, Pop TV is not quite there. And so as a result, the remuneration to the company is much less lucrative than it used to be. The viewership is much less in terms of numbers this week, not even the top 150 cable programs. And as a result, then ad revenues aren't what they could be and what they were back in the glory days. And there were glory days in TNA back late 2000 or first decade of the 2000s, around 2000, roughly 2007 to 2010, 2011. There were some really good days in TNA. Pay-per-view numbers on a monthly basis were decent, not great, but decent. That brought some money in. Well, now you have to wonder where the money comes from. The house shows. I don't think that TNA, GFW, Impact. I don't think they're doing house shows right now. When they did them, they didn't do them well, which is a problem. If you're going to do house shows, you better do them well. But at least house shows, again, it give you the opportunity to theoretically bring in some money. If you're not doing the regular pay-per-views, and now they're down to a couple a year, I want to say, again, hard to define in its current environment where WWE calls events pay-per-views, but really they're just excuses to get you to buy their monthly network. When Pop TV is not popping the numbers, and so there's a lot of money going out because. I'll give Anthem credit, and I'll give the predecessors credit, and that included Billy Corgan's group when they ran the ship there for a while. The production values, in my opinion, are pretty good. I don't know that you would look at that and say, yeah, they're not WWE, but they're not far from WWE. I'm someone who's worked in the inside of the wrestling business at an indie level, and we were putting on a TV show. In fact, put on a pay-per-view TV show back in 2011. I know the work that goes into putting TV on. I know that, even to put on a crappy-looking show like the one that we put on back in 2011, the Night of the Legends show, it is it's expensive to put on a crappy looking show. Not just the talent, not just paying the wrestlers, the announcers, that kind of thing, renting the building and that kind of thing, but just having the cameras, the producers, the directors, the truck, the people putting it all together. It's expensive, and and that's again the show that I worked on was one that even though it was very expensive for the people who put it on, it still looked like something out of a tape library from the 1980s. I think what GFW is doing now with Anthem, or Anthem is doing with GFW, I should say. I mean, it looks really good. I think it looks like good TV. And to me, the commentary on air is top notch. The work of the wrestlers is top notch in my opinion. Again, I think that there are some stars there. I mean, heck, all you gotta do is look at WWE right now. Their big stars are former TNA guys. AJ Styles is arguably the biggest star on SmackDown. He's not the champion now, but he's the U.S. champion, not the world champion. But he's been a pivot point the last year or so since the brand split last summer. Bobby Roode, new entry into SmackDown after a run as NXT champion. Just a couple of examples there. So, the wrestling is, and I look at the current guys there. Bobby Lashley, a former WWE guy, still looks the part, man. And he works okay, but he looks the part. He talks the part. Ethan Carter III, EC3, former WWE castoff. He's good as a heel or as a face. He's good either way. He's sort of that promotion's Triple H in a way. I think he's a guy that's very versatile and he can play that role, interchangeably. He can go from week to week and be a heel or a face. I think, and on the mic and in the ring, he's someone that I look at and say does a solid job on a regular basis. I like Eli Drake, the guy they put the title around after Alberto El Patron was stripped of the title for his domestic violence case that's still ongoing. I like Eli Drake. I think that guy is a guy that you can build around in the future. I've worked with Sanjay Dutt, who is the current X Division champion, but also behind the scenes is one of the top guys helping put the shows on from a producer standpoint. And I think the world of Sanjay. I think he's a really talented in-ring performer, and I think he also knows a lot about the business, and he's perfectly positioned for the role he's in. I say all this, and there's a lot of guys there we've worked with in the past, and I feel bad for the guys that this is an outlet for them. I don't have a company flow chart, but just thinking through the wrestlers that I watch on TV on a regular basis. Then you think about the producers behind the scenes. You think about the camera people, the production people. You're talking probably at least a couple hundred, 250, 300 people maybe that make money, make their living in the professional wrestling business. It's a business I love, and if Anthem has to sell out, and the buyer isn't someone like Ring of Honor or Billy Corgan, who may want to continue and would want to continue, I would assume, the promotion and try to take the ball and continue to run with it as best you can. If it's not someone like that, if it's WWE, and the Sports Illustrated article brought up again this week something we've talked about the last couple of times, this promotion has seemed to be on its way towards oblivion. That the idea that WWE would be a buyer, sort of like when WWE bought WCW when Vince McMahon bought it back in 2001. What did he buy it for primarily? I mean, he bought a lot of contracts of wrestlers who were smart and decided to sit out and live out their contracts, get paid for doing nothing. I don't blame him for doing that. I do it too. And then some of those guys eventually came on board. Some of them didn't. As far as working in a ring for WWE, but the primary thing that McMahon bought, and this is years and years. I mean, at least I think it was 13 years before WWE Network came to fruition. But he bought the tape libraries of WCW, which included the Great Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, the Georgia Championship Wrestling, those archives. And so, if you're thinking now that if Anthem throws out there, hey, we're for sale, and that they can't find anybody to take over the assets and liabilities from an ROH perspective, maybe a Billy Corgan perspective, someone else who thinks they can take it and run with it. from actually keeping the promotion alive perspective. If it's not that, it's WWE buying the tape library. Well, then they get the tape library that includes Bobby Roode. It includes AJ Styles matches. It includes a lot of guys that the Kurt Angle library. He's now the Raw GM. That's a great tape library to have. Another incentive for people like me, people like you listening, to either continue watching, continue paying for WWE Network, or maybe finally sign on so you can watch everything. Because when you look at it now, WWE Network's got, of course, the WWE and WWF archives. It's got the WCW archives. It's got the old World Championship Wrestling. That a lot of those they're adding more and more every month. But those 6:05 Saturday evening shows on TBS that include a lot of squash matches and occasionally a decent match. They've got World Class Championship Wrestling from Texas. They've got Mid-South Wrestling, Mid-Southern Wrestling, the Memphis territory, Global Wrestling. I mean, they've got it all. They've got archives back to the 70s and 60s. They've got those classic matches. Now add roughly 15 years of history of TNA wrestling. With a lot of those stars that interchange. Remember, because Mick Foley had a turn in TNA after leaving WWE and then going back to WWE. Kevin Nash had a long run there. Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan both did. Just to name a few. Of course, I mentioned Kurt Angle. Sting had a lot of. Sting. You got to think about it. Sting. WCW itself as an entity lasted for about 10 years, roughly 1991 to roughly 2001. Sting was in TNA from 2005 or 2006 up until his last couple of matches. Literally, those two matches he wrestled in WWE. There's a lot of good Sting stuff out there. The Hardy Boys, obviously, and that's now that's a thing to think about if you're a fan. So if WWE is not going to buy whatever they can get as far as the carcass of the old TNA library and everything else, just for the purpose of buying the property, intellectual property rights to the Broken Universe gimmick that Matt Hardy came up with and played so well in his he and Jeff's last few months in TNA. But that would be something that we as fans would get to benefit from. Then whatever legal battles that there were forthcoming over that gimmick, obviously they're gone if that entity is gone. So you have that. You might be able to buy a few contracts. WWE can pick and choose. They've, I think a big factor in this, and I wanted to transition from, and I guess I should conclude real quick and say, TNA has been on life support I don't know how many times in the last 5 years. So do not count this entity out. However it survives, I still think it's going to survive until someone finally pulls the plug. I don't know how it does. I don't know why it does, but it's probably going to survive in some form until, who knows? It's like a cockroach in a nuclear war. I mean, that's what maybe survives the thermonuclear annihilation, is the cockroaches out there. And I'm not down in TNA's people again. A lot of people I've worked with, but man, this thing just keeps on chugging as best it can, despite lots and lots of bad things happening behind the scenes. So, but a factor for me, when you start thinking about why is this company struggling, they've got a lot of talented guys. I mean, hell, again, WWE's making a lot of money with guys that TNA couldn't make money with. How is that possible? Well, one, I think that, again, it's expensive to put this on. I mean, in TNA, I'll give them credit. They went the monthly pay-per-view out there for a while. Found out that that's expensive. They found out what Paul Heyman found out years ago when he tried to finance ECW on the backs of a monthly pay-per-view, that those monies don't roll right in. The company that I worked for, when you do a pay-per-view event and people buy the pay-per-view, they have to pay their bills. The cable company reconciles. I mean, maybe 6 months or a year later, you finally get your revenues rolling in. Well, hell, you put the money out, for the night of the show. I mean, pretty much right around the night of the show. And, if you do those monthly, you're thinking, hey, big money rolling in, but you're putting a lot of money out to hope for that trickle to come back. That didn't work out very well to cut back the pay-per-view schedule. They tried house shows, half-assed tried house shows. High school gyms, middle school gyms, in small locations. Jeff Jarrett did all those minor league baseball game, post game mini shows. Those aren't going to work. You're basically selling a show to a minor league team as a post game inducement to stay a little later. It didn't work. It was an attempt that didn't work. I think the rise, ROH is what it is. ROH has got TV. They do house shows, but they're not a threat to a TNA. You've seen some other promotions come and go. I think that the biggest thing is the rise of NXT as a separate and not quite equal, but not exactly unequal entity within the WWE family. Now, obviously, we still look at NXT. A lot of us as fans and say, we'll even catch ourselves saying when he or she gets called up to the main roster. But I don't know how far away we are from just being able to say NXT is what it is. And NXT is going to rival the two big ones. I mean, Monday night is Raw, Tuesday SmackDown, and Wednesday is NXT. And you don't have to look around when you watch it on TV or go to a live event yourself to know that when a NXT wrestler makes his or her debut on a main card show, it's kind of funny how the whole arena is chanting whatever they're supposed to be chanting. That was chanted at those guys or gals by 300 people at Full Sail University. You have a whole arena of 15,000 people singing along or chanting along or using the catchphrase along with those stars when they make their move up to the main roster. That tells you that saturation's there. NXT's got the viewership on the network, and that's where they are. They're on the WWE network. They're not on main TV. They're not on broadcast or cable TV. So, those NXT takeovers, which we're fortunately getting more of now, again, also tell you the same story. Those guys walk out, those gals walk out through those, from Gorilla to the stage there. They got 15,000 people screaming for them when they do that. They're an entity in and of themselves, and so I don't know that Triple H, Paul Levesque, I don't know that Vince McMahon thought that was what they were creating. When Vince enabled Triple H to take the ball with the former Florida Championship Wrestling developmental territory and remake it into NXT, and then eventually get it a spot on the network and build an audience that way. I think they've still thought of, hey, we got Full Sail University here. It's a training ground. If they can work that live crowd of 300 or 400 people a week for those TV tapings, great. They get to practice being on TV, looking towards the camera, working towards the camera. They get to do all that stuff there, and then when they're ready for the bright lights, we'll bring them up. Well, the bright lights are there, and it's been an inadvertent huge success for WWE. For me, a key reason. I mean, it's having the access to NXT is as important to me as a WWE Network subscriber from basically day one of WWE Network being rolled out, as the access to those monthly pay-per-views, and now most months 2 pay-per-views now with the brand split. That NXT access is just as important to me because look at the long list of the current stars on the quote-unquote main roster who got their start, at least from the national exposure standpoint, in NXT. I know Kevin Owens was Kevin Steen in ROH, and he had a long career on the Indies, but a lot of us fell in love with him there in NXT. Sami Zayn, same thing. El Generico, right? But we got to know Sami Zayn really well. And I could name, obviously Finn Balor had a long record in New Japan. Shinsuke Nakamura came with Rockstar status and only enhanced that in NXT. Samoa Joe, another former TNA guy and Bobby Roode, a former TNA guy, who repackaged a little bit and then jumped from NXT to the main roster. It's something that I think that's as big an issue for the TNAs of the world as in TNA then, or TNA, GFW, Impact Wrestling, continually having those issues, securing those valuable TV contracts. They're on TV. They're on Pop TV, and that's something that the company that I work for, Awesome Wrestling Entertainment, never got. We never got a TV contract. So I'm not denigrating TNA for having a bad TV contract, but reality is when you're on Spike and you fall down to Pop TV, it's just tougher to survive. It's better than nothing. It's better than having what the company that I was with had, which was Facebook and spit and tape, because we had to put things together a lot on our own. We all wore 10 or 12 hats, but they're not far from that. So yeah, I'll still say I think it's until they pull the plug, TNA, GFW, Impact is still there, but we might not be far from the plug being pulled. So, you know, I'll say again, I'm sad in some ways. I'm sad for the people I know who have jobs. I'm sad for any people I don't know who have jobs in that company. I love the wrestling business, and for maybe up to 300 people to lose their livelihoods in the wrestling business. Some of them may get hired, you know, by WWE. Some of the performers you see on TV, for example, the Bobby Lashley, I assume he's someone who's still got a lot of value to me. If I'm Vince and Triple H, I want to have Lashley around. I wouldn't mind having EC3 around. Lashley maybe goes back to a main roster job right away, kind of like AJ Styles went straight to the main roster when he went from TNA and New Japan to the E. Didn't have to go through NXT first, but maybe EC3 goes the route of Bobby Roode and Samoa Joe and has a 6 months to a year in NXT. That'd be fun, actually. I think Drew Galloway is now going through. Drew McIntyre, I should call him, now that he's back to WWE status. There'd be worse things. Imagine EC3 in NXT. I mean, that'd be a lot of fun, I think. Again, Eli Drake, a guy that I think's a star in the making at least. Love to see him, interacting with some of those guys on that level. So, but not all those folks will have that chance, and the behind the scenes folks as well. I mean, WWE makes money because it knows how to, not just hire the best wrestlers, the best and best commentators, but they make money by putting on great shows and also doing it very economically. So they're not going to need to add, a lot of those behind the scenes people that you don't see and so yeah, there'll be a lot of people who would lose their jobs, and that's a sad thing. As someone who almost at one point talked my way into a job in the pro wrestling business, not as a wrestler, I'm much smarter than that, but behind the scenes, I don't like, and I don't like reveling in it. I know there are a lot of people out there, internet wrestling fans, who you favor, either you like TNA, GFW, and you hate WWE, you like WWE, you hate the others, you like ROH, and you hate them all. I like it all, and I root for everyone to be successful, because I think that, for me, I love the wrestling business, and there's no shortage of stories to tell, of talented people to tell them, and the more wrestling I get to watch every week, is better for me. It's less politics to have to keep up with, right? So we'll switch gears real quick here on this podcast. So we've talked a lot about the GFW news. Some news with Ronda Rousey. Ronda Rousey apparently has, there's a couple reports out there that she, we know that she was strategically on camera seated at the tapings for the Mae Young Classic, the WWE Network series that is a women's wrestling tournament along the lines of their Cruiserweight series they did so successfully last summer, and that Rousey in one of the segments has a confrontation. Her and her crew have a confrontation with Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch and their crew, and you have to think. I mean, we know that at least the reports are that Rousey has been training in wrestling. And so, if this is just a tease of something to come, be a hell of a tease. I don't think there's any doubt that if she's on camera in WWE in that context, the tapings of the Mae Young Classic, that there's something brewing there. I don't know if it's anytime imminent. But that's interesting. We saw that, we had that little taste of it last year at WrestleMania with her and The Rock interacting with Stephanie McMahon and Triple H in that very memorable segment out there in California, and that was just a small taste. Subsequent to that, of course, Rousey lost her last 2 UFC matches in dominating fashion. But that said, she's still Ronda Rousey. She's still, a lot of people's minds, the baddest woman on the planet. In the UFC world, losing doesn't make you completely unmarketable for the rest of your lives. I mean, think about Brock Lesnar. I think his career record in UFC was something like 6-3, but he's still known as one of the badassest guys in UFC history. Conor McGregor's lost a couple of matches. In UFC, they don't go through and carefully select their opponents like boxing top guys do to avoid defeat. And brag about their glittering 48-0 record. Obviously now Mayweather, at least nominally, retired at 50-0. So there's some similarities there with the top levels of pro wrestling, and there's no question that Ronda Rousey would still be. I mean, she'd be a huge get if and when it was formally announced that she had signed. If she signs with WWE, that would be huge news. It would be ESPN level news. It would be New York Times news. It would be news for everyone that Ronda Rousey. That would just be one of those things that Vince McMahon just stays up late at night thinking about, is how to get more attention like that. It'd be easy to get that kind of attention for him. For Rousey, it'd be obviously good too. Her status as a UFC fighter, is what it is. She's lost her last 2 matches. She can go back out and win a couple matches and get back in title position. But, think about the hard work that goes into that. The months of training camp for one match. So it could be a year and a half, 2 years before she's back in title contention. At the age she's at, I think she's 31 years old, if I have that right from memory. That's from a competitive fighter standpoint, that's getting towards, that's second part of your career. And, whereas if you go to work in WWE, now there's a lot of training that goes into that. It's a different level of training, but it's still very intense. I mean, I don't know how, if you're a wrestling fan, you probably have a great appreciation for it. But as someone, again, who's worked on the inside of the business, not as a trained wrestler, but working with the folks who, being in training schools and seeing that, and also myself then, I've run marathons, I run distance races. I know what it takes to things. Wrestling is very intense. The bumps they train each other to take, the trust and care they put into each other to make sure that they make it look realistic but don't kill each other. And then the travel to make the money in WWE, they're traveling 4 or 5 nights a week every 52 weeks a year to Monday Raw, Tuesday SmackDown, the pay-per-views, the big shows, all that stuff. In addition to the promotional stuff that's done, it's a grueling job. But it's grueling in a very different way than the competitive training is. So it's something that someone like Ronda Rousey would be good at because she's used to the grueling training. But it's also going to be different. I don't know how many folks out there, if you haven't watched the the Kurt Angle WWE 24/7 documentary on the network, please do so. It's only an hour long. They've put some good ones together. My cable went out last week for 4 days, and so I watched a lot of network last week in between sending expletive-laden messages to the cable company about not having access to baseball. But the Kurt Angle documentary was fascinating. A guy that, if you know Kurt's story, even just kind of remember the details, 1996 gold medal winner in wrestling in the Olympics. After breaking his neck at the U.S. trials, you might have heard the part about the breaking the neck, but it was actually at the U.S. trials in a semifinal match. Had to win that match with a broken neck, win the final match with a broken neck to earn the berth in the Olympics. Had to win 5 matches in the Olympics to win the gold medal with a broken bone in his neck. Breaks his neck 3 more times in WWE. Comes back. You might have kind of remembered some of the parts of the story. Oh yeah, I remember that Kurt broke his neck. I remember that he was, substance abuse. Well, the substance abuse is because he broke his neck 3 times and he was trying to hide it from everybody, including himself. But one of the, for me, how they do things kind of thing perspective, I thought it was very interesting to hear him talk about how hard it was. He thought he would go in to WWE, or at that time WWF, as a trained Olympic gold medalist wrestler. I mean, a guy who just did everything on the mat in the amateur business and thought it would be very easy for him. and he talked about the first day of training. He shows up at a training camp. Just this is pre NXT days. This is basically they have a ring set up in some high school gym somewhere. A bunch of guys are there. He's one of them. They actually have footage from this in the documentary. And there's a bunch of guys there just doing basic stuff, arm drags and headlocks and fireman's carry takedowns and learning how to take bumps. And he said at lunchtime that day, about halfway through the day, he turned to a guy that was there with him and said, "I'm quitting. I'm not cut out for this." Kurt freaking Angle doesn't think he's cut out for that. Of course, he becomes Kurt Angle. He stays, and he obviously does well and advances. But just to think that Kurt Angle, it was the first day of training, the first half day of training was so hard that Kurt Angle says, "I'm done. I'm quitting." So it's not easy to be, I'm going back to Ronda Rousey now. It's not easy to do this. Ronda Rousey was also an Olympic medalist. I don't think she was a gold medalist. I think she was a bronze medalist in judo. But she's been at the top of the game as an amateur. She's been at the top of the game as a professional shoot fighter. It's not going to be easy. So she's got some work to do. If you remember her that one turn we've seen on TV at that WrestleMania moment with her and Stephanie and Triple H, it was pretty awkward. And she's been pretty awkward on the mic in her UFC days, at least. So she's got work to do in wrestling. It's just not enough to beat the other people up. You've got to look good doing it, and you've got to talk it before you get there, and then talk trash when you're done. And so it's going to be some work, but it's going to be interesting. Because I really think for Ronda, this is the way to go. This is the way to squeeze 8-10 more years out of her career earnings that would not have happened in UFC. Capitalize on her fame. Keep her name out there for movie roles as well. I mean, look at WWE. It's a machine. John Cena is now making that transition. The Rock obviously made that transition. It's potential there that if you play your cards right and you become that next level star on the WWE programming, that you can make that transition and be a crossover star as well. So looking forward to seeing what happens with Ronda Rousey. And to quickly wrap things up, looking ahead to No Mercy, the one match, well, there's two matches I care about there. Because the Braun Strowman-Brock Lesnar match already has me clamoring for the thing to just start now. I don't care how they book it. I just want to see it. We got the taste of it back at SummerSlam, but man, one-on-one, this is going to be interesting. But then also the John Cena aforementioned Roman Reigns match, and I've seen some critics of the worked shoot back and forth they had last week on Raw. Where they broke the fourth wall, and Cena talked about how Reigns wasn't doing his job, and that's why Cena's still there, and all this stuff. And I've seen people say, "Oh yeah, you're talking to the insiders again, and you're just showing how uncreative it is." I thought it was great. I still think it's great. I love those kind of stories where you can't do it with every story. But I know that with the company that I got to work with a few years ago, one thing we did was, look, we don't have a big budget. WWE obviously has a huge budget, but we didn't have a big budget. So what we had to do was we had to make people think it was real. We thought. We played up a couple of stories where we created what felt like real life heat between guys, and people bought into it. And whatever level of success, we thought we did pretty good with at least selling our show. It didn't have legs, unfortunately, but people were interested in what we had to sell them. Got a lot of media attention and a lot of fan attention. Maybe you heard of us back then, and that's why you're still with us now. And so, we all know wrestling is a work. We all do. I mean, I say that. Last time I sat in a live crowd, I was at a SmackDown TV broadcast in Richmond, the Tuesday night in Richmond, and SmackDown's there, so it's on TV. And it reminded me that there are still quite a few fans who don't know that it's fake, but it is. You're listening to this podcast. You're not listening to me talking storylines. You're listening to me talk about the inside of the business. So we know it's fake. We know it's work. That's okay. People when people tell me or ask me, why do you like pro wrestling? It's fake. Well, I say, why do you like Game of Thrones? It's fake. I like Game of Thrones too. Why do you like Breaking Bad? It's fake. It's scripted. It's not real life. But you get into it, right? You sit down, you turn the TV on, you start eating your popcorn, and you forget that you're watching a work. You allow yourself to be entertained. You break that suspension of disbelief. Well, when I hear Cena and Reigns talking on the mic at each other the way they were, that I know it was a work, but it made me think there's some truth behind what they're saying, and I like that. That takes me away from all that's just they're just trying to get me interested in Cena versus Reigns at No Mercy. It made me think, hey, I want to hear what the guy's got to say next. Cena's just said this. What's Reigns say in return? Of course, Reigns didn't do great. I think a lot of us want Reigns to do better. We're booing him now. We want him to do better. He had a moment and didn't seize it, but I'm looking forward to that match. I'm looking because I don't know how it's going to be booked. I don't know how either of those top two matches are going to be booked. The rest of the card, I don't know. I'll probably be on Twitter the whole time. But those two matches, I'm going to be riveted to see those two matches, and also very much looking forward. I loved last night on SmackDown seeing Shinsuke Nakamura get the win over Randy Orton. Boy, he's getting a push. He's got wins over Cena and Orton in the last month. Like my boy Shinsuke heading into the Hell in a Cell, even though that match won't be a Hell in a Cell match. Looking forward to the pay-per-view nonetheless, and maybe they actually will have a Hell in a Cell match. We'll see. So I think that'll wrap us up. Thank you for joining in and listening to my podcast. And if you have any questions, comments, observations, you just want to tell me I'm suck, that's okay too. That's good. Feel free to email me, AugustaFreePress2@gmail.com. I'd love to, kind of take some direction on what topics maybe are of interest for future podcasts, maybe columns on the website, if you want to do them quicker, that kind of thing. Because that's what it's all about, is being able to interact. That's what makes us better, I think. Look forward to hearing from some of y'all out there. In the meantime, I guess we got to get ready for some more wrestling. I know as I'm finishing taping this, I'm not too far off from NXT coming on the network tonight. Look forward to that. Some TNA tomorrow night. And we'll see what else happens. Until then, thank you for listening.